The Empress of Dread Asterisk. The Empress of the Tharnix Empire was known across the stars as the most ruthless ruler in the galaxy. Her enemies called her the Endbringer. Her name alone could silence rooms, send entire fleets into retreat, and bring entire planets to their knees. Her empire stretched across thousands of worlds. No one dared to look her in the eyes. No one ever said no to her dot. Her warships were massive. Her throne world was made of dark black stone, orbiting a dead sun. Her guards were not born, but created giant, armored beings that never spoke. Her rule was absolute, but Empress Vecra felt something was wrong. For all her victories, for all her power, fear had turned into boredom. There was no challenge left. No enemy brave enough to fight. No mind clever enough to outthink her. She had crushed every rebellion, silenced every whisper. Peace, once desired, had become suffocating, until a new report reached her. A small scout vessel intercepted a human freighter in the outer fringe. The freighter refused to be boarded. A warning was given. Then a second. Still, the human captain did not back down. Instead, he dared to send a message directly to the Empress's throne channel. Her advisors were horrified. "It's a trap," one said. "He must be mad," another whispered. The Empress was amused. She ordered the human brought to her in chains dot in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Aboard a simple but heavily patched ship called Wanderer's Edge, Captain Raylan stood on. The bridge with folded arms and a calm look. The Tharnix dreadnought had arrived. Bigger than a city, its presence filled half the sky. Send the message? Raylan told his ship's eye. A blinking light signaled confirmation. His message had been delivered. "Tell your Empress if she wants my surrender, she can come ask me herself." He didn't blink. He knew who she was. The stories, the warnings, the legends, he'd heard them all. But Raylan wasn't impressed. He didn't believe in fear. Not anymore. Not after what he'd seen on Earth during the collapse. Not after surviving the siege of Europa. Compared to what humanity had faced on their homeworld, a cruel empress felt like just another tyrant with sharp teeth and fancy armor. He knew he'd be captured. He wanted it. He had a plan. Back in the heart of the Tharnix Empire, Empress Vecra watched the human's image on her screen. He had brown eyes, short hair, and wore a worn-out jacket. Nothing special at first glance. Yet his voice, the way he looked straight into the camera without fear, stirred something inside her. She hadn't seen eyes like that in a long time. "Bring him to me," she ordered. Alive, unchained. The entire throne room gasped. "No chains?" asked her commander. "No," she said. "Let's see if his courage is real, or if it fades when we meet face to face." The next day, a sleek Tharnix cruiser left orbit. It flew in silence. It had one goal: bring the human to her. Raylan stepped out onto the landing bay floor of the Empress's palace. Around him stood 20 towering guards, each one designed to destroy tanks with a single blow. He smiled slightly. He didn't flinch as the door ahead of him opened. Golden light spilled into the corridor. She walked out tall, graceful, eyes glowing like twin stars, skin like midnight metal, and a crown of sharp crystal blades. Her steps were slow, but each one echoed through the bay like thunder. She was everything the galaxy had feared. And Raylan just nodded once and said, "So, you're the Empress." She stared at him, shocked. No bow, no trembling, no begging, only calm, only confidence. Her lips curled slightly, not in anger, but in curiosity. This might be interesting, she whispered to herself. And for the first time in decades, Empress Vecra smiled. A real smile. Asterisk, the human who spoke freely. Asterisk Raylan walked beside the Empress through her grand palace. Tall black walls shimmered with moving patterns like stars trapped inside glass. Giant statues of past Tharnix rulers stood silently, watching all who passed. The guards followed close, weapons ready, but not a single one dared speak. It wasn't the human they feared, it was her. But Vecra. She walked slower than usual. She glanced at Raylan from the corner of her eye. Most visitors would be kneeling or weeping by now. Even hardened warriors had broken under her presence. But this human walked like he belonged here. No fear, no hesitation. You're either brave, she said, or foolish. Raylan smiled. Maybe both. She tilted her head slightly. Do you know how many rulers I've crushed? How many? Empires I've turned to dust? Do you know how many tyrants humans have outlived? He answered calmly. The guards stiffened. The Empress stopped walking. She turned to face him fully. You speak too freely, human. And you listen too little, Raylan replied. For a long moment, silence ruled the hallway. Then the Empress laughed just once, short, sharp, but real. Inside the throne chamber, a table was set for two. A test. Normally, only blood or business was discussed in this room. Today, it would be different. Raylan sat down without waiting. Again, the guards tensed. Again, she said nothing to stop him. Why are you here? She asked at last, her voice low but focused. I came to show you something your advisors won't, Raylan said, placing a small black cube on the table. Truth. With a gesture, the cube activated. A hologram rose, a spinning image of a dying moon, Tharnix banners hanging in the void, and underneath them, thousands of starved prisoners. Tharnix. Work camps. Covered up, hidden. Vkra narrowed her eyes. This is your empire, Raylan said. Built on bones. And he leaned forward. Humans did this too, long ago. We stopped. We learned. Maybe it's your turn. You're lecturing me? She said coldly. I'm offering you something no one else will. A chance to change. Before someone stronger makes you. A long silence followed. Most beings wouldn't dare say this to her. But that's what made it echo louder. Later that night, in her private hall, Vecra stared out at her empire from the high crystal window. The stars looked peaceful. But she knew peace was just the pause between wars. She remembered Raylan's eyes. No fear. No lies. Just bold honesty. Why hadn't she killed him? Why did she feel alive again? She tapped her comb. Keep him in the palace. No prison. No chains? Empress? Her general asked. I said, she repeated firmly. No. Chains. Raylan was placed in a guest chamber. Not a prison. Not a cell. Still guarded, of course, but he didn't mind. He stared out his own window. Somewhere far beyond this planet, Earth still turned. And he had done what he came to do. He'd planted the first seed. He knew it wouldn't be easy. This was the most feared woman in the galaxy. But something had changed in her eyes today. A crack had opened. And where there's a crack, light can enter. The next morning, the Empress summoned him again. He expected threats. Instead, she said something that surprised him. You interest me, human. I want to know more. He leaned back in the chair. Where should I begin? She nodded. Start with your people. Tell me why they fight so hard. Why they never kneel. Raylan smiled. That's easy. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every day. We learned how to survive. But more than that, we learned how to care. Even in pain, we look out for each other. And me? She asked quietly. Who looks out for someone like me? Raylan's gaze didn't waver. Maybe you just never gave anyone the chance. She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. Asterisk, the first crack in the crown. Asterisk Empress Vecra sat alone on her private balcony, staring at the stars. Her empire stretched far beyond what the eye could see, yet for the first time in decades, It felt empty. Raylan's words echoed in her mind. Maybe you just never gave anyone the chance. No one had ever dared to say such things to her. Her generals spoke only when spoken to. Her advisors lived in fear of her moods. And yet this human, with no army, no weapons, had walked into her palace and shaken the walls around her heart. Hated it. She craved it. Meanwhile, Raylan explored the palace gardens. He wasn't exactly free to roam, but the guards had relaxed. He spoke to them. Some ignored him. Others answered. One even smiled slightly. Something was changing. He knew why he was here. That it wasn't just about showing her the truth. That it was about reminding her she still had a choice. He paused near a quiet pond where alien birds sang in strange tones. The air smelled of spice and metal. He looked up toward the tallest tower, the Empress's chamber. He wondered if she was watching. That night, she summoned him again. This time, no guard stood between them. He entered the golden hall alone. She sat on a high platform, but her posture was relaxed, not the rigid strength of a ruler, but the uncertain stillness of someone lost in thought. You're still alive, she said calmly. Raylan chuckled. Guess you're not as cruel as they say? She raised an eyebrow. Careful. That sounds like trust. He stepped forward. No, just observation. They sat again at the long table. No weapons. No lies. Just two people from different worlds, trying to understand each other. Tell me about your Earth, she asked. He smiled, leaning back. It's a mess, but it's ours. Full of oceans, storms, deserts, forests. Our sun can burn you. Our animals can bite. Even the plants try to kill you sometimes. And yet you survived. We thrived. Because we helped each other. That's what makes humans strong. We adapt. We grow. And we forgive even when we shouldn't. She was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, Do you think I could be forgiven? Raylan met her gaze. That depends. Are you asking as a ruler or as a person? That question hit harder than any weapon. She looked down. As a person, she whispered. He didn't answer right away. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the stars. Then yes. But it starts with a choice. You decide what kind of story you want people to tell about you. Behind him, she clenched her fists. No one ever gave me a choice before. You just gave it to yourself, he said quietly. Back in her chambers, Vecra stood before the mirror. She saw the crown on her head, the armor on her shoulders, the cold stare in her own eyes. And then she took off the crown. It felt lighter than she expected. For the first time in her life, she saw not a ruler, but a woman. The next day, her palace changed. The workers no longer rushed in fear. The guards no longer watched Raylan like a threat. A low hum of life returned to the cold walls. Whispers spread fast. The Empress listens to the human. She smiles now. Something's happening. Her council panicked. They called secret meetings. They warned her, but Vecra ignored them. She walked the halls without armor. She met with engineers. She visited schools. And one evening, as Raylan stood near the central gardens, she walked beside him, not as a ruler, but as an equal. Do you still think I'm beyond saving? She asked. He shook his head. Not anymore. She looked up at the stars. Then maybe, she said slowly, it's time I show the galaxy that even the darkest throne can be touched by light. The Empress breaks her own rules. For centuries, the laws of the Tharnix Empire were carved in stone, unchanging, unbending. The Empress ruled above all, her voice the law, her orders absolute. But that morning, Vecra broke her first rule. She walked into the council chamber without her ceremonial armor, got no crown, got no glowing staff. Just her, plain, UNSHIELDED. The counselors, all dressed in dark robes with sharp collars and stony faces, stared in confusion. They whispered nervously as she took her seat at the circular table. "I have made a decision," she said. Silence. "I will be reducing labor quotas across 5 border colonies by half. The treatment of workers will follow Earth standard rights." Murmurs exploded like thunder. "Impossible," shouted one counselor. "Those colonies feed our warships." "Then we build fewer warships," Vikra replied calmly. "You can't do this," another hissed. "It's against tradition." She raised an eyebrow. "Tradition is not more important than mercy." The room fell silent again. One by one, the council lowered their eyes. They couldn't fight her authority, but now they didn't understand. And fear was turning to confusion. In the garden, Raylan leaned against a marble pillar as one of the guards updated him on the morning's events. "She ordered changes?" the guard said quietly. "Real ones, not just words." Raylan nodded. "Told you she had it in her." The guard looked around. "You should be careful." "The council hates you now." Raylan smirked. "They hated me from the start." He looked toward the high tower again. This time, he felt a strange connection, not with the throne, but with a soul trying to find its way out from under the weight of power. That night, Vecra didn't summon Raylan to the chamber. She came to his quarters instead. He opened the door, to find her standing there in a dark cloak. No guards, no royal markings. "Going for a walk?" he asked. She nodded. "Will you walk with me?" He didn't hesitate. "Sure." They walked side by side through the quiet palace halls, down to the lower levels where maintenance workers toiled. No one had ever seen her down there before. Some froze, some bowed, some simply stared. She didn't speak until they reached the edge of the service tunnels. "I built my throne from fear," she said. "It was the only way I knew." Raylan looked at her. "Maybe now you can build something better." She turned to him, eyes glowing softly in the dim light. "Why do you trust me? After all the things I've done?" He replied, "Because I've seen worse, and I've seen people change, even the broken ones." She breathed in slowly. Then whispered, "I don't want to be feared anymore." He smiled. "And let the galaxy see who you really are." The next day, Empress Vecra made her second bold move. She opened communications with Earth. A galaxy-wide broadcast. Every species tuned in, expecting a threat, a warning, or maybe a declaration of war. Instead, the Empress appeared not on her throne, but standing beside Raylan. She looked into the camera and spoke slowly, firmly. "To the galaxy I say this. The Tharnix Empire will change. The old ways of rule through fear are over. We will no longer crush the weak to feed the strong. And I offer open dialogue with Earth and its people starting now." Shock rippled across systems like a storm. Ambassadors dropped glasses. Commanders sat down in disbelief. Was this a trick? Was the Empress losing control? Or had something far greater happened? Raylan didn't say much during the broadcast. He didn't need to. His presence alone beside her was proof of change. The galaxy saw it, and more importantly, her people saw it. The Empress who once ruled through silence and power now stood beside a human who spoke freely and smiled without fear. And somehow the galaxy didn't feel smaller anymore. It felt new. Enemies in the shadows. The galaxy watched in silence after the Empress's broadcast. Some cheered. Some doubted, but others planned. Far beyond the throne world, in the shadows of deep space, a group of old Tharnix warlords met in secret. They had ruled through violence for years under Vecra's command. But now, with her speaking of peace and ends mercy, they saw weakness. "She's lost her mind," one growled. "No," said another coldly. "She's been poisoned by the human." They all knew who he was. The one called Raylan. The human who stood beside her like an equal. The human who made her laugh. The human who made her change. They couldn't let it continue. "If she won't rule through fear," said the eldest, "then we will." And just like that, rebellion began to form. Back on the throne world, Vecra felt something shift. Not in the palace, in the air. The silence had teeth again. Eyes followed her with caution. Whispers returned to the halls. The peace she had begun to build was cracking before it could set. Raylan met her in the garden. "They're moving against you," he said. She didn't ask how he knew. His instincts had always been sharp. "They see kindness as weakness." She said quietly, "That's because they've never seen strength behind kindness." She looked at him. "Then maybe it's time I show them." Raylan nodded. "But not like before. You don't need to destroy everything. You just need to remind them you're still the Empress." That night, her fleet commanders received a silent order: return home. Within hours, hundreds of ships began to shift course toward the throne world. Some returned gladly, others questioned. But all obeyed. Meanwhile, Vecra walked back into the council chamber. This time with a new expression, not cold, not cruel, but firm. "I know some of you doubt me," she said. "Some of you think the old ways are stronger. That fear keeps us united. You are wrong." She raised her hand, and a hologram flickered to life. The faces of the rogue warlords appeared, captured through secret intel. "They plan to overthrow this seat," she said calmly, "and I will let them try." The council gasped. "If they believe I am weak," she continued, "they will see what true strength looks like, not the kind that crushes the helpless, but the kind that protects them." One brave counselor spoke up. "And the human? Does he advise you now?" Vecra smiled slightly. "He reminds me I still have a choice. That makes him more valuable than any of you have ever been." The room fell silent. She stood up. "Prepare. For war, but not for conquest. This war will be for the soul of the Empire." Raylan watched as her warships began to land on the outskirts of the palace city. Hundreds of officers, troops, and even workers came to hear her speak. She stood on the high platform. No armor, no crown, but her voice cut through the wind. "There are those who wish to drag us back into the dark. They fear the light because they believe it makes us weak. But I say this: compassion is not surrender. Peace is not fear, and kindness is not weakness." The crowd stood still. "I will not become like the monsters we once hunted," she continued. "And I will not let them rule from the shadows. I offer them one chance. Surrender and help build something greater, or face me." That was the old Vecra's voice, but with a new fire. Stronger. Wiser. Human. Back in space. The rogue warlords received her message. They did not surrender. They prepared for battle. They would return to the throne world, and they would bring destruction. With them. As the warning sirens echoed through the capital, Raylan stood beside the Empress in her command chamber. The stars above showed enemy ships arriving in waves. She looked at him once more. "You came here to change me," she said. "But now you may need to fight beside me." Raylan placed a hand on the control table. "I didn't come to fight you. I came to stand with you." Her eyes locked on his. And for the first time in her long rule, she felt something she had forgotten. Not power, not fear, but trust. The last stand of the old guard, the throne world stood silent. Waiting for the storm. Above, the skies shimmered with the arrival of enemy warships. Dozens of black cruisers, marked with the symbols of the old Tharnix warlords, moved into orbit. Their engines burned red. Their weapons were hot. The Empress had given them a chance. They refused it. Now, she would give them one last lesson. Inside the command tower, Vecra stood before her generals. Raylan stood at her right. "This is not a war for territory," she told them. "It's a test of our future. If we fall back to fear, we lose everything. If we stand with courage, we build something better." The generals nodded, though some still looked uneasy. The idea of mercy was still new. But they saw something. In her now a fire that had nothing to do with rage and everything to do with purpose. Raylan leaned in. "They'll target the palace first." "I know," she said. "Let them." Across the city, defense systems came online. Anti-orbital cannons hummed. Shield generators pulsed like hearts. Civilians were evacuated to deep bunkers. But there was no panic. No screaming. There was belief. In her, and in the human who stood beside her without armor, without rank, just courage. The enemy's first strike came fast. Explosions ripped through the outer shield wall. Shockwaves shattered statues and scorched towers. But the core defenses held. Turrets lit up the sky. Fighters screamed through clouds like metal falcons. It was chaos. Raylan ran through the palace corridors with a small team, helping coordinate resistance. Though not a soldier here, he moved like one. His voice was calm. His steps sure. People followed him not because of orders, but because of presence. And that made all the difference. Vecra stayed in the heart of the palace. As enemy dropships breached the lower levels, her personal guard pushed back. But the old warlords had sent their best, bio-enhanced troopers. Ruthless, silent, trained to kill anything that moved. Her guards began to fall. She stepped into the hall herself. No armor, no shield, just her. The troopers paused. They saw her. The very Empress they had once followed. But she looked different, not weak. Not soft. Clear. Strong in a way they didn't understand. One trooper raised his weapon. She didn't flinch. Single shot rang out. The trooper fell not by her hand, but Raylan's. He stepped between her and the rest of the soldiers. Blaster still warm. "I told you," he said. "I stand with her." Another soldier moved. This time, Vecra acted. In one fluid motion. She brought her hand up and released a wave of kinetic energy that slammed the enemy's back. 3 hit the wall and dropped. The others fled. An hour passed. Then 2. Fires burned. Across the palace roof, towers crumbled. But the defenses held. Vecra moved among her people, not as a queen above, but as a leader among. She helped lift debris. She gave orders. She stood on the front lines. And beside her, Raylan fought like the storm itself. He never left her side. Not once. The final wave came at sunset. The largest of the enemy warships descended, breaking through the last orbital cannon line. It hovered above the capital, aiming its main weapon. Vecra looked up from the courtyard. She had one last option, something only she could do. She activated her old command code, one that had not been used in over 100 years. Deep underground, a hidden system awakened. From beneath the palace. A massive energy spike rose into the sky. A planetary pulse weapon. The sky lit white. The warship exploded before it could fire. Silence followed. Then, slowly, cheering. The people poured into the streets. Civilians, soldiers, workers. They cheered not out of fear, not because they were ordered, but because they believed again, not just in her, but in change. The city glowed with lights of hope. Vkra stood on the palace balcony, watching her people. Raylan stood beside her. bruised and tired, but smiling. "You still think one person can't change a galaxy?" she asked. He looked at her. "I think two just did." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached for his hand and didn't let go. The Empress and the human. The war was over. The old warlords were gone, defeated or captured. Their ships burned in orbit or drifted silently into space. The people of the Empire looked to the sky not with fear, but with hope. For the first time in generations, the Tharnix throne world-breathed. Vikra stood at the center of the Grand Assembly Hall. It had once been a place where threats were made and enemies crushed. Now it was filled with voices from many worlds. Leaders, thinkers, citizens, all invited by the Empress herself. She wore no crown today, just a dark cloak lined with silver, and beside her stood Raylan, a human with no title, no rank, but known now across the stars. Vikra raised her voice. "Today, we end the rule of fear. No more forced labor. No more silent obedience. From this moment forward, the Tharnix Empire will rebuild, not as an empire of control, but of strength shared through unity." Some in the room clapped. Others sat stunned. But no one walked out. Raylan leaned over. "That's the first time I've seen one of your speeches end with applause," she smirked. "Let's see if it lasts." Later, in the quiet garden where it all began, Raylan sat beneath the glowing tree, the same spot where he had first met her without armor, without pride. Vikra joined him, holding 2 cups of warm silver-fruit tea. "You were right," she said, handing him a cup. "The story we leave behind matters." He took it and nodded. "And now you get to write yours." She sat beside him, legs crossed, eyes on the small pond. "Do you know what the galaxy calls me now?" she asked. Raylan smiled. "You want the honest version, always." He looked up at the stars. "They call you the Empress who listened." She was quiet for a while. Then she said softly, "Good. I want them to remember me for that. Not just for the things I destroyed." Raylan looked at her, his voice gentle. "They will. Because of what you've built, and because you had the strength to change." She didn't speak again. She just leaned her head slightly against his shoulder. For once, there were no guards watching, no advisors whispering, no wars waiting. Just 2 people who had walked through fire, one feared by all, the other fearless by choice. And somehow, they had changed the course of a galaxy. In the following weeks, things truly began to shift. Aid stations were set up on broken planets. Former rebels were invited to councils. And Earth, once seen as primitive by many species, was now honored with a place at the highest diplomatic table because of one human. Because he dared to speak without fear and refused to back down from a ruler everyone else ran from. As for Vikra, her transformation was not just seen, it was felt. She visited schools. She walked unguarded through the streets. She listened. She forgave. And she remembered the words that had started it all. "Maybe you just never gave anyone the chance." Now, she gave chances to others. One evening, weeks after the war ended, Raylan prepared to leave. His mission was done. He'd changed what he came to change. His ship was small, nothing special, and it waited for him in the hangar. But before he could step aboard, she arrived. Vikra. No throne behind her, no fleet in the sky, just her. "You're leaving?" she asked. He nodded. "It's time. Others might need my help." She looked down, hiding her thoughts behind silence. Then, after a moment, she said, "I could come with you." Raylan blinked. "The Empress wants to fly in a ship held together with duct tape and old coffee stains?" She stepped closer, her eyes soft. "The Empress wants to see more of the galaxy than war rooms and throne halls." He smiled. "Then I've got a co-pilot seat open." She took his hand again, just like before, and this time She didn't. Let go, Dot, as the Wanderer's edge lifted into the stars. The galaxy watched once more. But not in fear. They watched as the Empress, who had once ruled with terror, disappeared into the stars beside a human who had shown her how to lead with something. Stronger, Dot, not with fear, but with heart. The end.